This is Football at 4.
Football at 4 is powered by the Inside the Birds podcast, and of course you can get that on all podcasting platforms. And don't forget, check out their YouTube channel. Just search Inside the Birds for all of the latest Inside the Birds social media content. And of course, Adam Caplan's here on a Friday. Free agency, the draft, it's in the books for the most part. The rookies are running around today. They have been on the field up at the NovaCare complex. So we're going to take a look at some of the win totals now that the dust has settled on the draft, see how all the movement has changed inside the NFC, the NFC East. This should be an interesting – I have not looked at these yet, so I'm going to be surprised when I see how the changes have occurred here. So let's bring Adam Caplan in from Inside the Birds podcast as he joins us now on a happy hour Friday look on Football at 4. What's going on, Adam?
Yeah, Mike, good to be with you. Yeah, we're all lamenting yet another early exit for the Sixers. That's 18 series that they've lost in a row where they got behind in the series, whether it was 0-1 or 2-1, 3-1, 3-2 like we had here. So it's embarrassing. We deserve better as fans. And I kind of throw my hands up anymore. I'm just kind of like, I'll always be a fan, but I just expect. And look, we went into the playoffs. We'll move on to the Eagles and other things in a minute. I knew they weren't going to go very far because this roster is not constructed very well. The bench was horrific. Remember what I've said about the bench? It's not how many players you have, it's the quality of the bench. How poor is their bench? I mean, you got to be kidding me. Awful.
Yeah, they obviously it was another frustrating end to a season. Both teams, by the way, they only played 7. I've never seen this. I don't know that I've ever seen it. The Knicks played 7 guys in their series as well. So both teams, it was a battle of attrition, which is, why the Sixers lost. I don't think they have as much attrition as the Knicks do.
No.
And that's why they're moving on. But, all right, man, it's football now. NBA is in this area. I was talking earlier with the Phillies. The only live game action you'll get to watch until the Eagles have a preseason game for the next 2.5 months is the Phillies. That's it. That's the only live game. Usually the Sixers give us an extra 2 weeks of some live game action. So let's take a look at the NFL and this NFC. Let's go win totals here post-draft. Let's start inside the NFC East and how the draft has changed the complexity potentially for some of these teams.
Yeah, so it's really interesting, and there's one that moves significantly in the NFC North, but we'll look at the NFC East first. So the odds actually stay the same for the Eagles and the Cowboys. So both 10.5 is their win total. The over is plus 105 for the Cowboys. The under is minus 125. I would agree with that. I think they'll be around 10 or 11 wins. I don't think they'll be great. They didn't do much to improve the roster. They had to get help at running back. They didn't get in the draft. This is how dumb Jerry Jones is, their owner and general manager. He does an interview before the draft, which you shouldn't do, by the way. You should not be giving out any information to the media. He says that Jonathan Brooks, the running back, I've known about their love about Jonathan Brooks for like 2 months. So he puts it out that, and he's quoted everywhere, that one of the best pre-draft interviews we've ever done. We're very, very interested in this player. Well, Panthers knew this. So did other teams. The Panthers draft him. The Cowboys don't wind up drafting a running back, and they needed one badly with Tony Pollard leaving. So they get an older Ezekiel Elliott. Good luck with that. The over, by the way, is plus 105. The under is minus 125. Same as it was before the draft, so it hasn't moved. I'm a little surprised at this one, Mike, just because it hasn't moved. The Eagles are 10.5 as well. The over is plus 100. The under is minus 120. It stayed the same after the draft. The Eagles, look, we could debate past the second round how good their draft has been. That's where the criticisms come in. I've got no criticism from anyone who works for any team, coaching or front office, that doesn't think the Eagles nailed the first 2 picks. Both will play pivotal roles where it's needed as well. You know, they had a very active free agency. And by the way, the big thing is, Mike, the coaching is going to be better. And let's not forget, we've not had back-to-back winners in the NFC East for 20 years. So the chances are Dallas is not going to win it.
Yeah, that's a fun little point that has been brought up over the last 20 years. I'm a little surprised, too, at 10.5 for Dallas, Philadelphia. And then the Giants and Commanders, when those numbers came out, they're both at 6.5 when we did this exercise a couple of weeks ago. I'm surprised that both of them stayed right at 6. I thought the Commanders really did a good job. They added a lot of players in the first 3 rounds that maybe could have gave them a tick up to 7 wins here, but no movement there.
Yeah, so the Giants are 6.5, as the Commanders are. The Giants are plus 100, under for 6.5, and under 6.5 is 130. In fact, I like the under there. And then the Commanders, the over is minus 130, where it is exactly the same. Look, I know they have a lot of change. They needed a lot of help. They had 9 draft picks. Probably they'll get a minimum of 4 starters out of it. They still have problems on their offensive line. They still lack pass rushers, and they've got problems in the secondary. That'll prevent them from being a wild card team. But the over, I certainly like the over, but you got to give up a little bit at minus 130.
All right, let's go to the North, where there was one team that had some movement. Interested to get your take as to why there was some movement for one team. By the way, Philadelphia will face this team.
Yeah, so let's go to the Lions. The Lions had a very small movement. They're still 10.5. The Lions, the over 10.5 is minus 110. And you could certainly understand that they're really, really good. Now, they had some big losses at corner, but they added 2, and the under is minus 110. Well, that was before the draft. Post-draft, the over, it went up from 110 to minus 115, and the under now is minus 105. So clearly they're betting the over. So Vegas, the odds makers are adjusting that. And now the Pack, I told you last time I was on, if you like the Packers at over 9.5, get it now. It's going to move. It didn't just move one, Mike, or a half a game. We'll give it to you right now. The Packers before the draft were over 9.5 at minus 135, which I think everyone, their mothers, probably would have loved, and the under would be plus 110. Probably the best pass target group in the National Football League if you put together the receivers and tight ends. Post-draft, it didn't move a half a game. It moved a full game, Mike. In 2 weeks, it moved a full game, everyone hitting the over. So now it is, what I find interesting, the over 10.5 is now plus 130, the under's minus 180. Because I think most of us, if we're evaluating, they should be around 10 or 11 wins. And let's not forget, a team that didn't play good defense last season still blew out the Cowboys in Dallas.
Yeah, it's funny because I think, you look at their draft and you're like, they drafted an offensive tackle at the 25th pick. They got a linebacker and a safety in the first, the 2 rounds of the draft here. What was so good about the draft that made them, the odds maker, really change, or I guess maybe a bunch of money came in on that other number?
Well, they needed a left tackle. They didn't have one. David Bakhtiari was cut. They needed some help on defense. They needed a middle linebacker. They got Adrian Cooper is phenomenal. They needed a safety. They got Jonathan Bullard. So they actually have 2 new safeties. And Xavier McKinney came up from the Giants, who the Eagles made an offer to, we're told, before he signed with Green Bay. And Javon Bullard is terrific. So, yeah, they had a good draft. And now we move on to the Bears, who are sort of like the hot team that people really like to be good. Well,
they were last year, too, weren't they?
What's that?
They were last year, too. Weren't a lot of people on, like, Fields and the Bears last year?
Maybe a little bit. Everybody was on the Lions. But the Bears, the total is 8.5. The over's minus 130. The under's plus 110. Now, post-draft, the over's minus 140, and they're plus 115, which means people are hitting the over, which I get it. Look, there's a lot of excitement. The Bears have been pretty moribund on offense for years, but not anymore. They're so talented at receiver in particular. They got DeAndre Swift at running back, Caleb Williams at quarterback. Defensively, they added some help there. I could see 9 wins. If I had to take a side, it would be the over. But the only thing is they don't have a very good pass rush. They did not add a significant piece. They added Austin Booker, who's a sleeper defensive end from Kansas in the 5th round. So that's what's going to keep them out of the playoffs. They just don't have any kind of pass rush.
All right, let's go down to the South, where one of the more controversial picks of the draft was Michael Penix going there. Now, in the post-draft here, I have heard some interesting retorts to people who like the pick, but the pick didn't change their over-under on the win totals here. You got Atlanta, Tampa Bay, New Orleans, and Carolina in the South, and nobody in this division is projected to win over 10 games.
Yep, the Falcons are still the favorite. 9.5. The over's minus 140. The under's plus 115. That was before the draft and after the draft, same numbers. Yeah, so look, they're buying the Kirk Cousins hype, and obviously they're not getting anything out of their first-round pick because Michael Penix won't play for a minimum of 2 years. As long as Kirk Cousins doesn't suffer a significant injury, he won't play. Michael Penix ain't going to play.
Mm-hmm.
So they're not going to get anything out of their first-round pick. And, boy, they needed help on defense. They were a very competitive defense last season with a different scheme. Now, we know Raheem Morris is really good, but they don't have a lot of talent. The Bucs now, as we move on to them, this is crazy. They won the division last year, and they have only a 7.5 win total, though they got Baker Mayfield back along with Mike Evans. The over's minus 140, which I would agree with, definitely like the over, and the under's plus 115. Now, post-draft, it moves slightly. The over now is minus 145. The under's plus 120, so people are now hitting the over.
Yeah. By the way, for the Falcons thing, the people who seemed to like it that I heard was because they got Cousins, that the team is going to be, decent, maybe even win the division and make the playoffs, and they won't be in position to draft a quarterback when Cousins is, a year or two older, and, they have their guy now so that they're not stuck in kind of the middle when they need a quarterback.
Oh, yeah, because you look at it, right? Cousins will be 38
right
when he starts year 3, but what we have to understand is the Falcons still did not help themselves. If you're a Falcons fan, you're excited about Cousins, you're excited about Raheem Morris, but you're not getting better with your first-round pick. That's what's hard to swallow.
Absolutely. Hey, listen, and as we talk about a lot, are you drafting for this particular year or are you drafting for long-term big picture? And Atlanta, with that pick, said, we're looking further down the road than helping.
Really down the road, Mike.
Yes, really
down the road. Look, I have not talked to anyone who agrees with what they did, but Michael Penix is a good quarterback. And look, they couldn't trade down because they knew they could lose him, so I get it. Let's get to the Saints where, I don't like this team. Derek Carr was not good last season. They've got offensive line problems, which is why they addressed it. The over is the 7.5 total. The over is minus 130 before the draft. The under is plus 110. It did move a little bit. The under now is minus 120. The under is plus 100, which means people are hitting the under, Mike. People agree with me that people don't think that they're going to be that good. And in the Panthers world, they're terrible. Their pre- and post-draft numbers are the same. 4.5, the over's minus 140, and the under's plus 115. They now have the NFL's worst roster. The Cardinals really helped themselves, which we'll get to in a minute.
Yeah, Cardinals, a lot of people like what they did. Let's get to the NFC West. You got the Niners, you got the Rams, who picked up our friend Boston Scott the other day, the Seahawks, and Arizona, who had the fourth pick in the draft and was the first team not to take a quarterback with Marvin Harrison there. So they are your teams in the NFC West. And any changes here?
Let's go to the Niners. No. So it is a big win total, 11.5. They definitely have the NFC's best team. The over is 11.5 at plus 105. So basically, if you're taking the over, you got to get 12 wins, but you get a little help. The under's minus 125. Pre and post the same. I think it's a very fair number. Their roster is fantastic, and they got a second-round corner, which they really need. The Rams, the pre-draft, the same as post-draft. The 8.5 wins, they overachieved last season. Raheem Morris is no longer there as a defense coordinator. The over is minus 125. The under is plus 105. Yeah, I'd like 9 wins. And Matthew Stafford's back. Their offense is going to be fantastic, but let's not forget about the loss of Aaron Donald. With his retirement, they drafted Braden Fisk, who's a defensive tackle, and Jared Verse, who's an edge rusher. They're really weak at corner, Mike. That to me is my biggest problem with the Rams. And then the Seahawks, as we finish this division out, the Seahawks, they remain the same at 7.5. The over's minus 125. The under's 105. And the Cardinals, what I find interesting, Mike, is, when they put these totals out a while back, I'm a little surprised that they gave the Cardinals 6.5 wins. But they knew they had 12 draft picks, and they did very well. They got probably 5 starters out of it. The over at 6.5 is minus 140. The under's plus 115, and it stayed the same. So, despite adding all these players, they didn't move it.
There you go. And the Cardinals, a lot of people like what they did, but maybe jump on that right now. 6.5 is the Arizona. That was a team that was in a lot of games last year, right? I mean, they beat the Eagles late in the year, but they played hard. They were that proverbial team that was like always there, but just not good enough. They added a lot of talent this year, so that's an interesting number for Arizona. Adam Caplan, Football at 4, is host of the Inside the Birds podcast with Jeff Mosher. By the way, the Eagles at rookie camp, right? This is just the rookies out there this weekend?
Yeah, and invited free agents, John Ross and others are there. Look, the only thing I've really gotten out of rookie camp when I would go, and it is interesting, I was there when Mailata was there, and I just remember being blown away at his size. And I remember again, this is 7 years ago. I haven't forgotten anything about it, Mike. So, or 6 or 7 seasons ago. I just remember, I know he doesn't know what he's doing, but maybe someday they could develop him. And who knew, Mike? He'd be like a top 5, top 6 left tackle. It's really a remarkable story. Obviously the most unlikely story of Eagles history, one of the most in NFL history. So there is value of putting your own eyes on these players. But I read nothing. There's no planning. There's nothing. The veterans aren't in there. I dismiss anything about a guy doing well until the veterans come in.
Well, they did bring in a 6'5", 318-pound Australian guy and put him at offensive tackle, Lakin Vakalahi. So keep an eye on him. Right? It worked.
Right. And by the way, I was going to say Chris Naoli. You might remember Chris Naoli, who is a big-time guard for the Jaguars and other teams and Saints. He's actually their director of international scouting. They hired him, I'm told, over a year ago. And I'm going to guess that he found that kid, that you mentioned him. I'm sure that he found him. And I give Howie Roseman credit. He spares, and Jeffrey Lurie, obviously, because he's got to account for it with the money. They spared no expense in trying to find these guys that no one else seems to be able to find. And remember, they traded up for Mailata in the 18 draft. So, look. You never know what you're going to find at the end of your draft or as an undrafted free agent.
I always found, but real quick, Adam, before we let you know, I always found that story interesting. Did they trade it up to get Mailata? Did they think someone else knew who this guy was?
Yeah. I don't remember. I don't know. I just remember hearing that there's this rugby star that nobody knows about, and Stoutland worked him out at the IMG Academy, and I'm like, okay, whatever that means. I mean, maybe he'll be one of those international players. I didn't think they'd draft him. There's no way you could know that he could be developed like this. And it's really, I just don't think, Mike, people really understand.
Right.
We see it now and go, oh, yeah, well, he's a great, really terrific story, big deal. This is way more, this is bigger than a big deal, Mike. This is a story that never should have happened. But also give the kid credit. What an unbelievable story development. And remember, he never put a helmet on until a couple months before he was drafted. It's
crazy.
And seeing him, Mike, at 6'8", and I've gotten to know Jordan a little bit, just seeing him at different events. Do you know at one point, a couple years ago, he was over 400 pounds and told to lose weight.
Crazy.
That's crazy, but yep.
All right, Adam Caplan, here we go. Football at 4 on this Friday edition. Eagles, you got camp, got some other OTAs and stuff that will be happening this year, which was not the case in the past, so we'll be all over that and more. Check out the Inside the Birds podcast on all podcasting platforms. Download it, and, of course, the YouTube channel. Just search Inside the Birds. Thank you, Adam. Have a good weekend, man.
You too. Thanks.